My favorite music is classical music. I think very long term, my favorite pieces are, hour and a half long symphonies, not 3 or 4 minute songs. So even when we're working on installations, it's really natural for me to think about, art not as a 2 or 3 minute thing, but as a thing that's probably going to last days, months, or years, and people are going to see different parts of it. I had a lot of references, Herbert von Karajan, who was a conductor of the Berlin Philharmonic, Glenn Gould, people who kind of decided they wanted to take their expression their own way, even if it wasn't the popular direction to take it. So here's the thing with other tools. You get other tools, and other tools do some things really well. Like, a lot of theater people use Isadora. All the audio people use Max MSP. All the VJs and kind of music concert event people use Resolume. So there's already so many softwares that do a thing or 2 things or 3 things. And what's crazy about TouchDesigner that I think makes it unique, but also really hard for a lot of people who try and get involved with TouchDesigner is it just does everything pretty good. And when I say it like that, it sounds bad, but then when you see all the things that people make with TouchDesigner, you're like, oh my god, what other software could possibly connect all these different inputs and connect it to all these outputs and get all the data from these places and use Python and process it in shaders and all this stuff all mangled together in one place. So it's kind of it's like when you had the ultimate Swiss Army knife. That's what TouchDesigner kind of is. The way it makes you think about what you're doing, because it's a mix between the node-based environment, so you have all these little blocks and they all do one little thing, and then you start connecting each one of the little blocks and all of a sudden you have an application. But you can also really get in there and code your own stuff, so you can use Python or GLSL, and it's a very interesting mix because a lot of software is either really heavy on one side and you're basically just coding and you never see anything until you're done, or you're on the other side and everything is pre-built for you. So TouchDesigner is interesting because it's a little bit of both. You have the visual aspect of it, you connect stuff, it's really intuitive. When you're working with clients, they love to see all the little blocks and nodes, and it helps them understand what you're doing. So I think that's a really interesting part of TouchDesigner. Actually, Coco Lab and Josue's work here was really interesting for me because my career has always been from that viewpoint of doing really, really big corporate work. The big brands, the big clients, Google, IBM, all these other ones. If you want to get a good career, make good money and do that, that's a really good direction to go in. Then there's kind of the artist way, and you kind of do festivals, galleries, and residencies and things like this. And then when I met Josue, and he was kind of telling me about the process that Coco Lab has and all the different ways you're trying to bring more cultural projects and really building your own projects and then finding clients later for them. I thought that was really interesting. So it's almost more of the approach, and then obviously all the stuff that Coco Lab does looks awesome. But the approach was really interesting for me because I hadn't heard that kind of approach yet. And I think maybe that's something that's unique to Mexico City also, which is a city with so much rich culture that's kind of bringing up that art scene and the interactive scene at the same time around it. Okay, so everyone I think loves their first project. Your first big project. Yeah, it was kind of like your baby. You made all the mistakes ever on that project, and somehow you still finished. And you're on the job site and no one's sleeping. And the first time you experience that, you kind of never forget. For me, that was I was working with AV&C out of New York, who brought us on to work on the Seattle Art Museum in Seattle with the artist Doug Aitken, who designed a really interesting system that I guess that was 6 years ago now? And it's a permanent installation, so it's still there, and it's all these different LEDs on the outside of the building with lots of sensors that check the environment and then change the kind of display on the outside based on what's going on. So it was a really cool project. It was the first big project I did, and so many mistakes were made, but it was a really fun time, and it was very memorable, yeah. Collaboration, education, and moving around have always been 3 big things for me. Collaboration kind of happens naturally, maybe just because people like my funny jokes, but Education is something I really prioritize. If everyone gets really good at TouchDesigner, it doesn't mean there's more competition because there's so many projects. I've never in my life thought, oh man, we have more developers than there are projects. Like everybody wants something interactive and there's not enough people that can do it. So the more people there are, the more projects there are, and then the more collaboration there is. So everyone kind of wins in the education. I would separate corporate interest from technology infrastructure. That is the reason why we have so many technology, socio-technical problems, things like the Facebook privacy issues, things like when we talk about telecommunications companies like controlling internet access to people and overcharging, so many technology issues we have today because of corporate interest and technology infrastructure has been linked. So I think that's like my nerdy answer. Another thing would be bad jokes, maybe. Like maybe fossil fuels. Fossil fuels are really bad. Currency exchanges, because exchanging currency is a gigantic pain. Read lots of books because there's like thousands of years of knowledge in books. And I think people are so used to watching YouTube videos to learn stuff, and they just don't realize there's so much stuff in books. It's unbelievable. Philosophy books, go read some Salzburg, go read some Camus. Computer books, that's how I learned how to do all when I was starting out, YouTube wasn't that big, so I had to just read books to figure out how to do all the TouchDesigner stuff. So yeah, reading is the first one, and I think for TouchDesigner, specific advice would be for people to be hungry, because I think a lot of people are really self-conscious about maybe their lack of skill, because TouchDesigner is a tool where you can do so much that a lot of the time it can paralyze you, where you feel like you don't know enough.
Okay, thank you so much.
No problem. It's lots of fun.
Yeah.